We live in a world obsessed with speed. Everything is built around how fast we can get something done, how quickly we can reach the next goal, how immediately we can see results. We praise efficiency, glorify productivity, and romanticize the hustle. But somewhere in the noise of movement, we've forgotten something essential: direction. Because moving fast means nothing if we're headed the wrong way. Clarity over speed, that's the first rule for a life that works. When I talk about clarity, I'm not talking about having every step of your journey mapped out. I'm not talking about having a 5-year plan that's bulletproof and predictable. Clarity isn't about certainty. It's about knowing your why. It's about understanding what drives you, what matters to you, and what kind of impact you want to make. See, most people are in motion, running, working, achieving, but very few are actually going somewhere that matters. We confuse activity with progress. We confuse motion with meaning, and we end up exhausted, not because we're doing too little, but because we're doing so much that doesn't matter. Think about it. How many of us have worked late nights, chasing deadlines, feeling the rush of getting things done, only to realize months later that we're still in the same place emotionally, still unfulfilled, still unsure why it doesn't feel right? That's what happens when we value speed over clarity. We reach the wrong destination faster. Clarity gives direction. It's what helps us say no to what's merely urgent so we can say yes to what's truly important. And it's one of the hardest skills to develop because it requires slowing down in a world that demands you keep up. It requires listening to yourself in a culture that keeps you distracted. There's a story I often think about of a young professional who got his dream job in a big city. The pace was fast, the expectations were high, and he loved it. For years, he climbed the ladder, moving from one opportunity to the next, and people admired him for it. But one day, on his commute to work, he realized he didn't even remember why he started. He had achieved almost everything he thought he wanted, yet he felt empty. It wasn't that he failed. It's that he never stopped long enough to ask what success really meant to him. That's what happens to so many of us. We start with passion, we start with energy, but without clarity, passion turns into pressure. The goal becomes about keeping up instead of showing up. Clarity is the antidote to confusion. It's what gives our actions meaning. It's what helps us stay grounded when life pulls us in 100 directions. When you know what you stand for, decisions become easier. Not because life becomes simple, but because your compass does. Speed often makes us reactive. Clarity makes us intentional. One comes from fear, the fear of missing out, of being left behind, of not being enough. The other comes from purpose, the quiet confidence that you're moving towards something that matters, even if no one else understands it. I've met so many people who are moving at incredible speeds but are deeply unfulfilled. They're successful by every external metric, but they feel lost internally. That's because speed without clarity leads to burnout, not balance. It's like driving a car at full throttle without a destination. Exciting at first, but meaningless in the end. Here's the truth: clarity often comes in stillness, in reflection. In solitude, it comes in the moments when we allow ourselves to stop chasing and start listening to our hearts, our instincts, our discomforts. Because discomfort is often direction trying to speak. The things that frustrate you, the moments that make you feel most alive, those are clues. They're whispers of clarity. But we ignore them because slowing down feels like falling behind. We tell ourselves we don't have time to think, to reflect, to breathe. But if we don't make time for clarity now, life will eventually force us to stop later, usually in the form of exhaustion, crisis, or regret. Clarity doesn't mean you'll have all the answers. It just means you'll know what questions are worth asking. It means you'll know when to say, this isn't for me, and when to say, this is where I'm meant to be. When we choose clarity over speed, we give ourselves permission to live with intention. We start aligning our work with our values, our goals with our purpose, our relationships with our truth. That alignment, that's what makes life work. I remember once speaking with a leader who said, I feel like I'm constantly chasing something I can't catch. And I asked him, what if you stopped running? What if you just stood still long enough to ask whether you're chasing the right thing? He laughed nervously, but later told me that question changed everything. Because when he stopped moving long enough to think, he realized he'd been chasing recognition instead of fulfillment. That's what clarity does. It shifts your definition of success. It makes you realize that maybe success isn't about getting ahead of others. Maybe it's about getting aligned with yourself. There's a quiet power in being sure of where you're headed, even if you're not moving fast. The tortoise didn't beat the hare because it was faster. It won because it was focused, it knew its path, it didn't get distracted by the rush. In our culture, we often celebrate speed, the overnight success, the viral moment, the instant win. But clarity is what creates sustainability. Speed gets you there faster. Clarity ensures you're proud of where you arrive. You can measure speed. You can't measure clarity, but you can feel it. You feel it in the calmness of your choices, in the peace you carry even when things are uncertain, in the confidence of saying no without guilt. That's when you know you're living with clarity. If you want a life that works, don't start by asking how fast you can go. Start by asking why you want to go there in the first place. Don't measure your worth by how much you can do. Measure it by how much of what you do truly matters. The world doesn't need more people moving fast. It needs more people moving with purpose. Because purpose-driven people build things that last. Relationships, teams, legacies, they don't just build careers, they build meaning. When you have clarity, even failure feels different. Failure doesn't define you, it refines you. You learn, adjust, and continue because your direction hasn't changed. You still know where you're headed, even if the path shifts. That's why clarity creates resilience. It keeps you grounded when life shakes you. Speed, on the other hand, makes you fragile. When you're always chasing the next thing, the moment you stumble, you lose momentum, often motivation. But with clarity, you can pause, adapt, and move forward again. Because your motivation isn't external, it's internal. So how do we find clarity? We start by asking better questions. Not what should I do next, but why does this matter to me? Not how do I get there faster, but where do I actually want to go? Clarity begins when we stop comparing our journey to someone else's. When we stop measuring our progress by someone else's timeline. When we stop trying to outpace others and start trying to outgrow ourselves. Every time you choose clarity, you choose peace over pressure, you choose growth over noise, you choose purpose over performance. And in that choice, life starts to make sense again. There's a phrase I love: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It's a lesson from the military, but it applies beautifully to life. When you move with clarity, you move smoothly, you make fewer mistakes, fewer detours, and your progress, though it may seem slower at first, becomes far more sustainable. A life that works isn't one filled with frantic motion. It's one built on meaningful direction. It's waking up each morning not to rush through the day, but to live it with purpose. Clarity over speed isn't about doing less. It's about doing what matters most. It's realizing that sometimes the fastest way to get where you're meant to be is to slow down, because speed will get you there first. But clarity will make sure you're proud of where you arrive. We live in a world obsessed with breakthroughs. We crave the big moments, the massive transformations, the lightning strikes of success that turn everything around overnight. We want to go viral, to be discovered, to leap forward in one defining moment. But real life, doesn't work like that. A life that works isn't built in bursts of inspiration. It's built in layers of discipline. It's not the firework that shines once and disappears. It's the candle that burns steady through the dark. Consistency beats intensity. That's the second rule for a life that works. We love intensity because it feels good, it feels powerful, it's exciting to start something new, a new goal, a new project, a new routine. We pour our energy into it, we commit hard, we go all in. But then, when the excitement fades and the results don't come fast enough, we stop, we think we failed. But the truth is, nothing was wrong with our goal, we just didn't stay long enough to see it grow. Consistency is quiet. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't post about progress every day. It just shows up. It's not glamorous, and that's why it's so often overlooked. But consistency is the difference between those who dream of change and those who live it. Think about the gym. On January 1st, every treadmill is full. Every weight rack is crowded. People are driven by intensity, new year, new goals, new energy. But come March, the gym is half empty, not because people didn't care, but because the fire of intensity burned out before the habit of consistency could take hold. We do the same thing in our careers, our relationships, our growth. We start with passion, but we forget that passion is a spark, not the fuel. What keeps you going isn't intensity, it's commitment. Here's what I've learned: it's not what you do occasionally that defines you. It's what you do consistently. The small things done daily shape the big things eventually. Success, fulfillment, mastery, they're all built on repetition, not revolution. We often look at successful people and think they must have had a big break. But if you look closer, you'll find something else. 1,000 small, unseen repetitions, late nights, early mornings, rejections, adjustments, try again, try again, try again. They weren't just intense once, they were consistent always. Intensity is about emotion. Consistency is about principle. One is driven by how we feel in the moment. The other is anchored in what we've decided matters, regardless of how we feel. When you're consistent, you build trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Every time you follow through, even on the smallest promise, you tell your brain, I can rely on me. That trust compounds. It becomes confidence. It becomes identity. The truth is, consistency isn't hard because we lack motivation. It's hard because we crave results too soon. We forget that growth hides in repetition. We get bored, and in boredom, we assume we're stuck. But consistency feels boring only until it starts paying off. Then it feels like mastery. There's a story I love about a stonecutter. Every day he strikes the same stone with his hammer. Once, twice, 100 times, nothing happens. But then one day, with one more strike, the stone splits. Was it that final strike that broke the stone? Of course not. It was the 100 before it. That's consistency. It's invisible progress until it's not. We're wired to celebrate the visible, the breakthrough moment, the achievement, the result. But the invisible, the repetition, the discipline, the small daily wins, that's what sustains the visible. The problem with intensity is that it's unsustainable. You can't sprint forever. You can't live in a state of constant push. Eventually, life catches up. You get tired, distracted, discouraged. But consistency allows for rest. It's not about perfection. It's about persistence. It's doing something small every day, even when you don't feel like it. The best performers in any field understand this. Great athletes don't train only when they're inspired. They train because it's part of who they are. Great leaders don't show up only when things are exciting. They show up because they've made a commitment to something bigger than themselves. Intensity asks, how much can I do right now? Consistency asks, what can I do every day? And that question changes everything. Consistency creates rhythm. Rhythm creates flow. Flow creates growth. When you repeat something with purpose, your brain rewires itself to make it easier, smoother, more natural. It's not just about doing the same thing. It's about becoming the kind of person who does that thing effortlessly. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't wake up every morning excited to brush your teeth. You just do it because it's who you are. Imagine if we treated our goals the same way. Imagine if showing up for your dreams was as natural as showing up for your hygiene. When we rely on intensity, we burn out. When we rely on consistency, we build up. Let me tell you something about relationships. The best ones aren't defined by grand gestures, the expensive gifts, the surprise vacations, the passionate moments. They're defined by the daily consistency of care. The text that says, I'm thinking of you. The listening without distraction. The quiet showing up when it matters. That's what builds connection. Not the big things done occasionally, but the small things done continually. The same applies to leadership. Great leadership isn't one inspiring speech. It's 1,000 small moments of consistency, listening, encouraging, correcting, showing empathy, setting an example. People don't follow you because you were intense once. They follow you because you were consistent always. If you want to build trust in your work, your team, your relationships, yourself, show up, even when it's boring, even when it's inconvenient, even when it feels like no one's noticing, because they are. The world sees patterns more than it sees promises. Consistency doesn't mean never changing. It means staying steady through change. It means holding on to your values even as your environment shifts. It means adapting without abandoning who you are. There's a beautiful thing that happens when you choose consistency. You start to fall in love with the process instead of obsessing over the outcome. You start to find joy in showing up, not just in finishing. You stop chasing the finish line because you realize the growth was happening all along, one step at a time. People often ask, how do I stay motivated? The answer is, you don't. Motivation is unreliable. It's emotional. It fluctuates. You stay disciplined. Discipline is consistency in action. It's the ability to do what needs to be done even when you don't feel like it. The funny thing is, once you embrace consistency, motivation starts showing up more often because progress fuels motivation. The more you show up, the more results you see, even small ones. And those results create momentum. Momentum is the reward of consistency. If you want a life that works, build habits that last longer than your moods, because moods change. Feelings fluctuate, but habits hold. It's not about working harder for 2 weeks. It's about working smarter for 2 years. It's not about running a marathon in a day. It's about running a mile every day until the marathon doesn't feel impossible anymore. Every great tree was once a seed, but that seed only became a tree because it stayed planted. It endured the seasons. It didn't uproot itself every time the weather changed. That's consistency, staying grounded when life tests your patience. We often ask, how long will it take? But the better question is, how long am I willing to keep going? Because when you're consistent, time becomes your ally. The longer you stay, the more growth compounds. The more you repeat, the stronger the foundation becomes. There's power in the ordinary. The repetition of small, right actions creates extraordinary results. You don't have to be remarkable every day. You just have to be reliable every day. Reliability creates results that intensity never can. Sometimes consistency looks like showing up tired. Sometimes it looks like giving half your best when that's all you have. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. Because every time you show up, you're reinforcing a truth. I'm still in the game. And that truth, that steady commitment, builds a life that doesn't crumble when things get hard. It builds character, resilience, and peace. Because peace doesn't come from control. It comes from consistency. The most successful, fulfilled people aren't the ones who sprinted hardest. They're the ones who stayed longest. They understood that greatness isn't built in moments of intensity, but in the quiet persistence of showing up again and again long after the mood has left. Consistency isn't exciting. It's not dramatic. It won't get applause every day, but it's the foundation of everything that lasts: love, trust, mastery, purpose. And when you look back years from now, you'll realize it wasn't the few moments of passion that changed your life. It was the hundreds of moments when you chose to keep going, because consistency beats intensity every single time. We live in a time where progress is everything. We measure our worth by how much we've achieved, how far we've gone, how many boxes we've ticked off our list. We celebrate productivity as if it were purpose, and we chase progress as if it were fulfillment. But there's a dangerous illusion in that chase, the illusion that moving forward automatically means we're moving in the right direction. The truth is, not all progress is progress. Some of it is just motion disguised as meaning. That's why the third rule for a life that works is simple purpose before progress. Without purpose, progress is empty. It's like climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. You might reach the top, but when you get there, you realize it's not where you wanted to be. We've all been there at some point, achieving something that looked impressive to everyone else, but felt hollow to us. That's what happens when we chase progress without asking why. Purpose gives meaning to movement. It turns effort into impact. It's what transforms a job into a calling, a task into a contribution, and a life into a legacy. Purpose is not about what you do. It's about why you do it. The purpose is the anchor that holds you steady when progress slows down, when the results don't come fast enough, when the world doesn't applaud you. Progress by itself can be deceptive. It's easy to get addicted to the feeling of doing more, earning more, achieving more. The problem is, more is not the same as meaningful. You can be incredibly busy and still feel deeply stuck. You can be moving at full speed and still be going nowhere that matters. When we put progress before purpose, we start to measure success in the wrong ways, in numbers, in followers, in dollars, in titles. And while those things can feel rewarding, they rarely sustain us. Because deep down, we don't crave applause. We crave alignment. We want our lives to make sense. We want to know that what we're doing matters. There's a story about a man who spent years climbing the corporate ladder. He was ambitious, discipline driven. He hit every milestone, checked every box, and earned every promotion. But one night, as he sat alone in his beautiful office, he realized something that scared him. He didn't know why he was still climbing. He had achieved progress, but he had lost purpose. That realization broke him open. Because for the first time, he saw the truth: progress without purpose isn't growth. It's just movement. When your why is clear, progress becomes a tool, not a trap. You stop needing to prove yourself because your work becomes an expression of who you are, not a performance for others. Purpose turns pressure into passion. It turns frustration into fuel. It gives you endurance when progress seems invisible. There's a reason why people who know their purpose can endure challenges that would break others. It's not that their path is easier. It's that their path is anchored. They're not just chasing results. They're serving something bigger than themselves. That's what gives them resilience. Progress may slow, setbacks may come, but purpose keeps them grounded. Purpose doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It shows up in the small moments, in how you treat others, in the way you show up when no one's watching, in the quiet conviction that what you're doing matters even if no one else notices. That's the kind of purpose that makes life work. We often think purpose is something we have to find like it's hidden somewhere, waiting for us to stumble upon it. But purpose isn't found, it's created. It's built through the choices we make every day. It's built through reflection, honesty, and courage. It's not about what the world expects from you. It's about what the world needs from you that only you can give. When we focus only on progress, we start comparing ourselves to everyone else. We measure our success by someone else's highlight reel, and that comparison robs us of joy. But purpose eliminates comparison because purpose is personal. It's unique to you. It's not about being the best. It's about being real. I've seen so many people lose themselves in the race for progress. They start out with genuine intention. They want to build, to create, to grow. But somewhere along the way, they start measuring worth by results. And when the results don't come fast enough, they feel like failures. But purpose reminds us that not every season is harvest. Some seasons are planting, some are waiting, some are pruning. But they're all progress when they're aligned with purpose. Purpose keeps you patient when the world tells you to rush. It reminds you that growth that lasts takes time. It gives you the courage to say no to opportunities that don't align even when they look good on paper. Because not everything that looks like progress will lead you where you're meant to go. Think about the people you admire most, not just for their success, but for their significance. What they all have in common isn't speed, wealth, or status. It's clarity of purpose. They know why they do what they do. And that why shapes every decision, every action, every step forward. When you live with purpose, progress becomes a byproduct, not the goal. You stop asking, how far can I go? And start asking, how deeply can I serve? You stop chasing success and start building significance. And that's where fulfillment begins. There's a difference between achievement and fulfillment. Achievement is external. It's what others see. Fulfillment is internal. It's what only you can feel. Progress can give you achievement. Purpose gives you fulfillment. The world often teaches us to chase the first and forget the second. But a life that works requires both progress that serves a purpose and purpose that gives meaning to progress. When you put purpose before progress, you stop needing constant validation because you're no longer working for approval. You're working from conviction. Your sense of worth isn't tied to the outcome. It's rooted in the effort, in the alignment, in the intention behind what you do. Sometimes progress means stepping back. Sometimes it means slowing down. Sometimes it even means starting over. And that's okay because when your life is guided by purpose, direction matters more than speed. A detour doesn't scare you when you know your destination. The challenge is that purpose requires honesty. It forces you to confront questions that don't have easy answers. Questions like, what do I value most? What kind of impact do I want to make? What would I still do even if I never got paid for it? These questions strip away the noise and bring you back to what's real. Most people avoid those questions because they're uncomfortable. It's easier to just keep moving, but motion without meaning eventually leads to exhaustion. Purpose, on the other hand, renews your energy. It gives you strength that achievement alone never will. When you work with purpose, even setbacks feel different. They're not failures, they're feedback, they're lessons pointing you back to alignment. You learn to trust the process, not because it's always pleasant, but because it's always purposeful. There's a calmness that comes from living with purpose. You stop needing to prove, to rush, to compete. You start to build from peace instead of pressure. You realize that progress isn't a race, it's a rhythm, one that flows naturally when you're doing what you're meant to do. Purpose doesn't eliminate the struggle, but it gives it meaning. It transforms your pain into perspective. It turns your effort into expression. It makes even the hardest days worthwhile because you know they're part of something bigger. If you ever feel lost, don't ask, what should I do next? Ask, why did I start? That question has the power to bring you back to yourself. It reconnects you with your purpose, the reason beneath the reason. A life that works isn't one that's filled with endless progress. It's one that's filled with meaningful progress. It's not about how fast you climb, but about whether the climb matters. Progress will make you efficient. Purpose will make you fulfilled. Progress will get you ahead. Purpose will make sure it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, no one remembers how quickly you reached the top. They remember why you climbed in the first place. So don't chase progress for the sake of progress. Chase purpose. Let your why guide your how. Let meaning shape your momentum. Because when you live with purpose, life doesn't just move, it works. We live in a world that rewards performance. We measure success by outcomes, numbers, and achievements. We track followers' profits, productivity, and results. And in doing so, we sometimes forget the very thing that makes all of it worthwhile: people. We get so focused on what we're building that we forget who we're building it for. and who we're building it with. Somewhere between ambition and expectation, we lose connection. But life, real life, doesn't work that way, because a life that works isn't driven by results. It's built on relationships. Relationships over results. That's the fourth rule for a life that works. The irony of success is that many people climb to the top only to find themselves alone. They have the results, the titles, the wealth, the recognition, but they've lost the connections that make life meaningful. They became so focused on winning that they forgot how to care. And without care, success feels hollow. Results can fill your bank account, but only relationships can fill your heart. We are wired for connection. It's in our DNA. From the moment we're born, our greatest need is not achievement. It's belonging. Every great story, every meaningful experience, every lesson we truly remember is tied to people. Yet somehow, as we grow older, we start believing that relationships slow us down, that emotions are distractions, that empathy has no place in progress. But the truth is, the opposite is true. Relationships don't slow you down. They sustain you. They give you strength when the results fade, when the numbers drop, when the applause stops. I've met leaders who drive incredible results. They push hard, demand excellence, and get things done, but their teams are tired, disconnected, and uninspired. They may achieve great things, but they rarely sustain them, because people will work for results, but they'll go to war for relationships. They'll give their best when they feel seen, valued, and trusted. When you prioritize relationships over results, you're not choosing to be soft, you're choosing to be smart, because connection is the foundation of collaboration. You can't build trust through metrics. You build it through moments of honesty, empathy, listening, and understanding. We often say business is business, as if that phrase justifies a lack of humanity. But business is human. Every transaction, every deal, every project, it's people, and people don't commit to spreadsheets. They commit to people. Results are temporary. Relationships are timeless. Results fade with changing markets, shifting trends, or new goals. But relationships, real human connections, outlast all of it. When you build with relationships, first you create loyalty that no competitor can replicate. Think about your own life. The moments that mean the most to you aren't about what you accomplished. They're about who was there when you did. The people who supported you, believed in you, stood beside you when things didn't go as planned. That's where meaning lives. When we put results above relationships, we start to see people as tools instead of teammates. We start to measure their worth by what they produce instead of who they are. That mindset destroys culture. It creates environments of fear instead of trust, competition instead of collaboration, burnout instead of belonging. And no matter how impressive the results look on paper, that kind of success never lasts. Relationships are not a distraction from results. They're the reason results happen in the first place. Trust is what makes teams perform. Empathy is what makes leaders inspire. Connection is what makes innovation possible, because when people feel safe, they speak up. When they feel supported, they take risks. When they feel valued, they give their best. It's easy to care about people when things are going well. The real test comes when they're not. When deadlines are missed, when mistakes happen, when performance dips. That's when relationships matter most. Because in those moments, how you treat people defines who you are. Results may recover, reputations might rebuild. But the way you make people feel will echo for years. A life that works is one where relationships aren't sacrificed for success. They're part of it. Where kindness isn't seen as weakness, but as strength. Where listening isn't a pause before your turn to speak, but an act of respect. We live in a culture that glorifies independence. We admire the self-made, the lone wolves, the people who did it all on their own, but no one truly does it alone. Behind every success story are countless hands, hearts, and conversations that shape the journey. Even the strongest leaders are only as strong as the relationships that hold them. When we put relationships over results, we begin to see people differently. We stop judging them for what they can give us and start valuing them for who they are. We learn to appreciate the quiet contributors, the ones who may never get the spotlight, but who keep everything together. I once met a manager who was known for his numbers. His team always hit their targets quarter after quarter, but when he was promoted, something interesting happened. His entire team's performance dropped, not because they weren't capable, but because they didn't feel connected anymore. He had driven results through control, not through connection. And when the control left, so did the motivation. Later, a new leader took his place, one who valued relationships. The numbers didn't recover immediately, but the culture did. People started collaborating again. They care again, and soon the results came back stronger than ever. That's the power of relationships. They might take longer, but they last longer. Relationships aren't just professional, they're deeply personal. The way we treat our friends, our families, our colleagues, it all reflects how we value people. The strength of our relationships determines the quality of our lives. Because at the end of every day, it's not about how many tasks you completed or how much you earned. It's about who you connected with and how you made them feel. When we focus only on results, we tend to rush through relationships. We listen to reply instead of listening to understand. We talk more than we ask. We forget to check in on people, to notice when they're struggling, to celebrate when they succeed. But relationships thrive on attention. They need time, patience, and presence. You can't fake genuine care. People can always tell. When your intention is sincere, they feel it. When it's transactional, they feel that too. That's why relationships must come before results, because relationships are built on trust, and trust takes time. In leadership, this truth becomes even more critical. A great leader's job isn't to demand results, it's to develop people. Because when you invest in people, results take care of themselves. The most inspiring leaders don't motivate through fear. They inspire through connection. They make people feel safe enough to be honest, confident enough to take risks, and valued enough to grow. There's a simple question I often ask leaders. If your people could quit their jobs tomorrow and still pay their bills, would they stay? The answer to that question tells you everything about the relationships you've built. In our personal lives, the same rule applies. You can have all the success in the world, but if you have no one to share it with, it won't feel like success at all. True joy doesn't come from achievement, it comes from connection, from being known, understood, and loved. Results make you impressive. Relationships make you human. We're not remembered for what we built, but for how we treated people while building it. We're not remembered for how fast we grew, but for how much we cared. The people around you will forget your accomplishments, but they'll never forget your kindness. And here's the beautiful irony: when you put relationships first, results actually improve. Because people who feel connected, supported, and trusted don't just work harder, they work happier, and happy people are productive people. So build relationships that outlast results. Build trust that outlives titles. Build a life that measures success not by what you achieve, but by how many people you lifted along the way. Because when life gets hard, and it won't be your results that carry you through. It will be the people who stand beside you, the ones you laughed with, listened to, believed in. Those relationships are the real reward. A life that works isn't built by standing above people, it's built by standing with them. Because in the end, results fade, relationships remain. And that's what makes life worth living. Perfection is a moving target. The moment you think you've reached it, it shifts. You can always do better, be better, perform better. That's the illusion of perfection. It promises satisfaction, but it delivers exhaustion. We live in a world obsessed with perfection. We edit our photos, polish our presentations, filter our words, and hide our flaws. We want to be admired, respected, and seen as strong. But in chasing perfection, we forget the power of grace. Grace is the quiet strength that allows you to keep going when you fall short. It's what gives you peace when you fail and humility when you succeed. Grace is not weakness, it's wisdom. It reminds us that we are human, not machines built to perform flawlessly, but people built to grow, to stumble, to learn, and to love. We often mistake perfection for progress. We think that to grow means to eliminate mistakes, but progress isn't about being flawless. It's about being flexible. It's about showing up, trying again, learning, and moving forward. Even when it's messy, grace is what gives us permission to try again. Without grace, progress becomes punishment. There's a difference between having high standards and being enslaved by them. High standards push you forward. Perfection holds you hostage. High standards say, I want to do my best. Perfection says, if it's not perfect, it's not worth doing. And that voice, that relentless inner critic, doesn't drive excellence. It destroys confidence. Grace allows space for imperfection. It teaches us that the point isn't to be perfect, but to be present. You can't connect deeply with others if you're constantly trying to prove that you have it all together. Vulnerability is the birthplace of trust. When you admit you don't have all the answers, you open the door for others to join you, to collaborate, to create something real. In leadership, this lesson is especially powerful. The best leaders don't project perfection, they model grace. They don't pretend to have every solution, they show humility in seeking input. They don't punish failure, they guide learning. A team built on perfection fears mistakes. A team built on grace grows from them. The truth is, perfection is lonely, it keeps you distant. You can't connect with someone who never lets their guard down. Grace, on the other hand, invites connection. It says, I'm human too. It allows others to exhale, to feel safe enough to be themselves. And when people feel safe, that's when creativity, collaboration, and trust begin to flourish. Somewhere along the way, we started believing that mistakes are signs of weakness. But mistakes are proof that you're trying, that you care enough to risk doing something that matters. Every great invention, every inspiring breakthrough, every meaningful piece of art was born out of trial and error. It was born out of grace. The grace to keep going after getting it wrong. I've met countless high performers, people who've achieved incredible things. And yet many of them live with constant anxiety. They're afraid to fail, afraid to disappoint, afraid to fall short of expectations. They live under pressure, and that pressure becomes their prison. But when you introduce grace into their mindset, something shifts, the weight lifts. They start to realize that their worth isn't tied to performance. It's tied to their humanity. Grace doesn't excuse mediocrity. It empowers mastery. Because when you're not paralyzed by fear of failure, you're free to explore, to create, to innovate. You're free to play. And creativity by its nature is imperfect. It requires room for mistakes. It thrives in curiosity, not control. Think of the people who've inspired you the most. Were they perfect or were they authentic? Did they pretend to have it all figured out? Or did they let you see their struggles? It's not perfection that moves us. It's honesty. It's the courage to keep showing up even when things aren't perfect. That's what inspires people. When we live by perfection, we judge others harshly because we judge ourselves harshly. But when we live with grace, we extend understanding, patience, and kindness. Grace makes room for growth, both in ourselves and in others. It transforms the way we lead, the way we parent, the way we love. The people who live with grace are not those who never make mistakes. They are the ones who refuse to let mistakes define them. They understand that every setback carries a lesson. They know that strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising again and again with humility and heart. The pursuit of perfection teaches us to hide. Grace invites us to heal. I once worked with a company whose culture was built on perfection. Every mistake was magnified, every flaw criticized, people stopped taking risks. Meetings were silent. Innovation stalled. Everyone was too afraid to fail. Then the leadership team made a radical shift. They replaced blame with curiosity. Instead of asking who messed up, they started asking, what can we learn? That one shift transformed everything. People started experimenting again. Ideas flowed freely. Morale lifted. Grace didn't make the company weaker. It made it unstoppable. Perfection looks like strength, but it's fragile. One crack and it crumbles. Grace looks gentle, but it's resilient. It bends, adapts, and endures. Grace can survive disappointment, failure, and criticism because it's rooted in acceptance. And acceptance is what gives us peace. When you live with grace, you stop trying to control everything. You begin to trust the process, even when it's uncertain. You understand that progress is not always linear. Some seasons are about growth. Others are about grounding. Some moments are about climbing. Others are about catching your breath. Grace teaches you to honor the pace of your journey. We've been conditioned to believe that achievement equals value, that the more perfect our lives look, the more worthy we are. But the truth is, your worth doesn't depend on what you produce. You don't have to earn your right to rest, to exist, to be loved. You're already enough. You always have been. Grace reminds you of that truth when perfection tries to make you forget it. It whispers you're still worthy, even when you fall short. When we lead with grace, we become better humans. We stop treating people like machines and start seeing them as whole beings with emotions, struggles, and stories. We stop demanding constant output and start creating environments of empathy. Grace in leadership doesn't mean lowering standards. It means raising humanity. Imagine a world where we celebrated effort as much as achievement, where we thank people not just for winning, but for trying, where we created cultures that valued learning over judgment, progress over perfection. That world would be more creative, more compassionate, and far more sustainable. Grace is what turns mistakes into mentors. It transforms failure into fuel. It allows us to look at the parts of ourselves we're ashamed of and say, even here, I am growing. That mindset changes everything. We often talk about resilience as the ability to bounce back, but true resilience isn't about bouncing back to who you were before. It's about growing into someone wiser, stronger, and more compassionate. Grace is what makes that transformation possible. When life falls apart, perfection tells you to hide the mess. Grace tells you to find meaning in it. When you lose, perfection tells you that you're not enough. Grace tells you that you're still worthy. When you make a mistake, perfection demands punishment. Grace offers perspective, and that's the secret. Grace doesn't erase the pain of failure, but it gives it purpose. It turns disappointment into direction. There's a quiet confidence that comes with grace. You stop competing with others because you understand that everyone's journey is different. You stop needing validation because you've already accepted yourself. And when you lead from a place of calm assurance, not frantic comparison. The leaders who embody grace don't seek to impress. They seek to impact. They don't demand perfection from their teams. They inspire growth. They don't lead with authority. They lead with authenticity. And people follow them not out of fear, but out of respect and love. In our personal lives, grace works the same way. The relationships that last are not the ones built on perfection. They're the ones built on forgiveness. We hurt each other, misunderstand each other, disappoint each other. But grace gives us the courage to repair, to reconcile, to keep showing up for one another. That's how trust deepens. So, what would it look like if you gave yourself more grace? If you stopped punishing yourself for every mistake and started thanking yourself for every effort? If you stopped chasing perfection and started embracing progress? You might just find peace in the process. Grace doesn't mean you stop striving. It means you stop suffering for not being perfect. It means you can hold yourself accountable without losing compassion. It means you can dream big without destroying your joy. The truth is, you don't need to be perfect to be impactful. You just need to be present, authentic, and human. People don't connect to perfection. They connect to presence. They connect to stories, to emotions, to honesty. When we trade perfection for grace, we rediscover joy. We start to enjoy the journey again. We start to laugh more, forgive faster, and love deeper. We start to live lighter. A life that works isn't perfect. It's patient. It's kind. It's forgiving. It's full of grace, grace for ourselves and grace for others. Because perfection might impress the world, but grace will heal it. And that's what truly makes life worth living.